stabilizes after severe flooding and landslides. Barrackpore man chops friend in an alcohol-fueled dispute. And domestic violence victim sues state over collapsed assault case. Now for the details. A roadside stop turned fatal for 56-year-old truck driver and mechanic Anil Drake Singh on November 21st near Princestown. Singh, originally from St. Julian Road, stopped to urinate when his van, parked too close to a hidden precipice, shifted as the edge of the road gave way. The vehicle struck Singh, who fell before flipping down a 30-foot landslip. While two friends in the van survived with injuries, Singh later succumbed at the Princestown District Health Facility. His sister, Anela, recalled her shock, saying Singh was initially responsive but complained of breathing difficulties before becoming unresponsive. She has called for caution signs to prevent future accidents. Barrackpore police are investigating. Singh's funeral is set for November 26th. The Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government has launched a coordinated response to flooding and landslides caused by heavy rainfall from a low level through on November 23rd. The bad weather triggered significant street flooding, fallen trees and landslides, particularly in northern Trinidad. Areas like Upper La Puerta Avenue, La Saiva Road and Long Circular Road saw blocked roads and property damage. Disaster management teams, along with agencies like CPEP and the Fire Service, have been working to clear roads and assess damage, with cleanup efforts continuing in locations such as Carenage, PT Valley and Crystal Stream. The ministry urged residents to stay vigilant and report issues to local corporations. A drinking session turned violent in Barrackpore on November 20th, leaving a 23-year-old man hospitalized with severe injuries. Police say the incident occurred around 10 p.m. at the home of a 52-year-old man on Kanai Road North. An argument over alcohol escalated, leading the older man to attack his friend with a cutlass, inflicting multiple wounds to his legs, chest and abdomen. The victim returned home despite his injuries, while the attacker called police, confessed and handed over the weapon. He also guided officers to the victim's home, where they found him in bed and rushed him to the San Fernando General Hospital. The victim remains hospitalized and PC Cyrus is investigating. A domestic violence survivor has filed a constitutional claim against the state, alleging police and prosecutorial failures led to the dismissal of assault charges against her ex-fiancé, violating her fundamental rights. The case, assigned to Justice Carol Gobin, will be heard on December 11th. The woman, who remains anonymous for safety reasons, claims the police prosecutor missed multiple court hearings, causing the case's collapse in May 2023. She accuses the state of failing to ensure accountability for such lapses, leaving victims without justice. The victim alleges her ex-fiancé assaulted her and her mother in 2022 during a child handover. She said delays, procedural missteps and insensitive questioning by police compounded her trauma. This case comes amidst widespread criticism of the criminal justice system's handling of domestic violence cases and calls for stricter enforcement to prevent procedural failures. The claimant seeks damages and declarations of constitutional violations. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Magnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
This whole thing about raises, it's something that's lingering, I think, far longer than it needs to, assuming everyone involved had, in my opinion, the awareness to know what should be said and what should not be said. Now, when the callers called in, and I guess he reminded me, we probably had the discussion before yesterday, to the point where at least someone else brought it up, if it wasn't him before, that, look, there are going to be people who are underpaid and who probably deserve a raise. The question is, who do we collectively think they are before we go all up in arms over who will actually get? But to some extent, because wage negotiations with regards to various areas in the public sector are big stories right now, with potentially certain critical job functions being taken offline due to industrial action or the want of industrial action. In the case of the port workers, they were ordered back out to work. I can understand why a judge will make that decision. That doesn't necessarily means I think it's fair. But the point is, and I said before, the port workers, I think, are in a rock and a hard place. To some extent, the country is also in a rock and a hard place. It all depends on who you think is more deserving or whose motivations are more justifiable in that situation, of which it could be debated. I'm not here for that. Those wage negotiations are critical, high profile, important, and they touch upon what's going on with senior government officials and the SRC. Yes, before we move on from this topic, I just want to highlight again, it seems as though you could tell agendas based on the perspectives conveyed in the messaging by various politicians. Now, recently, an independent senator and a media practitioner, as well as a judge, started to question these things. The judge himself pointed out that, look, at least for my job, I am more compensated than my regional peers, and right now, things are rough out there. I don't have it rough, so why do I, or my position, why should my position get a wage increase, using himself as an example? And then he went on to say, well, maybe everybody should take what the government is offering everybody. Wouldn't that be fair? And there's nothing wrong with that per se. Because yes, we could say, oh, it is ridiculous that this senior government official or that senior government official is underpaid. The fact of the matter is, at least to some degree, certain technocrats, you could argue, should be paid more, but you know, it doesn't have to be so straightforward. You can make it straightforward if you want. That's not always the best thing to do. But my point is, the rank and file is only getting such an increase. To what extent is it justified that senior officials get a greater increase, right? And like I said, with regards to technocrats, with regards to non-elected officials, I am not sure if we should give them the raises to the current office holders, or rather give the office a raise while the current office holders are in that office. Because remember, they ascribe to whatever they ascribe to. Their agreement to take the job was not, yes, but we know that salaries will increase by 2024 to this amount, and that's what's expected in our contracts. So there's no requirement to do so. And then, of course, there's the whole thing about are they deserving or not for a wage increase? Because on a certain level, if you want to increase the wages of the position, to some extent, it's hard to justify it if the job performance is not there. Then you wait for the time to replace said person, you put the wage increase into the office, and then with the incoming person, you say, all right, whatever your predecessor did, that is not good enough because we have increased the salary. That's my stance, I think, that I'm leaning more towards. But if you want to say, no, we just, certain permanent secretaries, the commissioner of police, as much as well, you know what I think about this situation with the commissioner of police. If someone wants to say, no, we just raise all of those people, fine. But what about the elected officials? Well, one likes to straddle between his union background and his current status. The Duke, one of the more interesting people in the political stage, the only man I ever know that declared his love for another by abandoning his outside woman. That's just, you know, he doth so loveth his wife that he has discarded his mistress. Anyway, played out on social media publicly. Don't know why that had to happen. But the gentleman in question, Mr. Duke, he has made comments about those who are saying, yes, increase. In fact, the Prime Minister deserves more. I don't like Dr. Keith Rowley, but he deserves $100,000 a month. And he says that, and then he goes on to say, and just like the senior government officials should get what they deserve, all of the workers should get what they deserve too. Let me get we're talking equity, we're talking fairness, we're talking justice, right? The trade unions must stop the talk and get down to action. It is an indicator that people are paying what they are worth, and so therefore the union must use the same strategy and say, pay us what we are worth. Now again, I ascribe to the belief, because we've seen this with EFCL, we've seen this with TNTech always having a $1 billion outstanding bills to pay every year, if not more. We've seen this with the police service not having enough funds to do whatever it has to do. We've seen the Coast Guard runs out of fuel, you know, and at that point, what's the point of the Coast Guard if they don't have fuel for their boats to go out to sea? Among other things where we see financial shortfalls. Don't even talk about local government, and it's not just a UNC thing because the PNM is in power. PNM local government bodies also have restricted financing. In fact, one UNC regional corporation, I believe they essentially only got half the money allocated to them for the year a couple years ago. When I first had a conversation, I can't remember, it could have been Penal Davy, I can't remember which corporation councillors I was speaking to at the time. Now, Mr. Duke has come out and saying, demand what you're worth. Because of the SRC, I no longer have because it's not like I have seen the books, so we know what the budget is. The budget that is publicly presented is not the cash flow of the country. Because there are a lot of things that we should be buying, paying for, or getting done that we're not, so it doesn't show up on the deficit. With the SRC, Watson Duke, as much as I disagree with it, on principle, he is correct. If it is good for one, it should be good for all, not so? He has leeway now to say these things and to encourage the union, and obviously, based on his background, he's leaning towards union. Fair enough. Now, the thing is, I mentioned what I said before about his personal shenanigans. He made it very public because he's a very aggressive and bombastic individual. So we have to take what he says, I guess you could say, with a grain of salt, because that's how he represented the PSA in the past, I found. He was one of the most unreasonable union leaders amongst the lot. But that's my opinion. So everything that he says is going to be through those lenses, right? Now, but I'm conceding the fact that, look, at least at the base level, he's not wrong for saying we need to treat everybody fairly. The door is open for him to go down that road. So I don't want to hear the Minister of Finance saying that Watson Duke is saying rubbish. Now, an economist could maybe say it, a technocrat could maybe say it, but I don't want to hear the government saying it because they didn't do what they needed to do to nip this in the bud from the start. Case in point, government ministers, they don't want to say nothing. In fact, one daily newspaper, this one in Newsday, they have apparently gotten the comment from 2 MPs who only spoke to the paper on condition of anonymity. And even with anonymity, all they were willing to say is, one, I have no clue what is going to happen, and the second one, I prefer not to speak on this. Like, hold on. You go somewhere to say, I want my identity to remain anonymous, to protect me from what I might say, and then you're going to say, I don't want to speak about it. It seems as though the decision over this has not been made. But the flip side is, they know, the government knows well enough, they can't just say, yes, we should do this, and move forward with it. I don't know what it is they're waiting on, because to me, the decision seems obvious, because you have an election, like I said last year. Is this an indicator that maybe they're thinking, we don't really need to win this next election, you know? I mean, Com said it in the courts. The next 3 years, kind of rough. Do we want that on our record? But here's an example of what should be done. I'm not sure if this is the first time asked, but the media reached out. This time, I'll say the Guardian, reached out to the THA. The Chief Secretary didn't comment, but the Deputy Chief Secretary, in my opinion, gave the response that this situation demands. The salary is not why we offered ourselves for office. We do our best and will continue to do our best regardless of the decision of the Cabinet or Parliament. And now, if she were to go on to say to all of the workers under the THA and that she is directly responsible for and indirectly responsible for as Deputy Chief Secretary, if she were to tell them, listen, I understand what you're going through, and I'm right there with you, I'm very certain she would be far more believable than if anybody from the central government or rather the cabinet were to say that right now. And it's not too late to reverse that perception. I just don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And the longer they take to make this decision, the more disingenuous it seems. You know, it's low-hanging fruit, but there was an American Civil War movie by the name of Glory. Denzel Washington, I believe, got his first Oscar in that movie. I think it was a supporting actor Oscar. It was about a black regiment created for the American Civil War. The members were from all walks of life. And in the movie, they faced racism, even just to get the pay promised to them. And this is a job to go and essentially, war back then was exceptionally bloody and exceptionally risky. So the least you could do is pay the men. But they didn't want to pay them. So the white colonel decided, well, I'm not going to take pay either, and tore up his pay slip after he saw his men tear up their pay slips in protest. It wasn't that they weren't getting paid. They weren't getting paid enough. They weren't getting paid what other soldiers were being paid. So they decided, well, we're just not going to take this pay. And he decided he wasn't going to take the pay either. And then you saw all of the troops who were underneath him, who legally were supposed to follow him, now they were more willing emotionally to follow him. Because they felt as though even if he doesn't fully understand us, even if he doesn't understand the circumstances that we're in, he's willing to stand with us. And essentially, to some extent, that's what the opposition is saying. That's what the Deputy Chief Secretary of the THA is saying. But the silence and the non-committal stance of the cabinet and government is not saying that right now. And again, it's not impossible to turn that around. I don't know exactly, maybe there's a very good reason. Sometimes there is a very good reason why on a technical level they're taking their time. But if that is so, communicating it to us would be beneficial, no? All right. Spending too much time on this SRC topic, have to go straight into today's Daily Review. Now, I just wanted to get this story out quick. We have been told the dragon will save us, the dragon. Because the dragon gas deal is one of the few pieces of good news within, you could say, the last year. There's been maybe whatever the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing when it looks good and professional and engages internationally. Minister Brown was at the UN giving speeches, looked all official, that's nice. Minister of Public Utilities, with the exception of this fiasco at WASA due to this Freedom of Information Act court matter and the details that came from it, other than that, the Minister of Public Utilities has gone on to work with WASA, praise the workers of WASA who are moving forward to get projects, to get more wells, to get more water supply for the nation. That's moving forward at, I would say, a reasonable clip given our budgetary restrictions. And then the good news starts to dry up from there, right? I might be missing a ministry that has good news. Most of the stuff coming out of tourism, I personally would not consider that good news because it's stuff that we've seen and heard before. And we've already seen that it has little to no effect on the tourism industry. So yes, even the cruise ship arrivals have very limited effect on our tourism earnings. But energy, there was a little bit of hope. There was a little bit of hope. Karen and I were initially happy with some of the things that the Ministry of Energy was doing. And actually it was Mr. Shah that kind of said, hold up, I'll believe it when I see it. And now we've reached the point where the Minister of Energy, I believe it was him that said, listen, this upcoming US election, we don't have any issues. We're not worried about it. But now, apparently, the government is engaging with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle in order to try to secure support for dragon gas. Because to some extent, the political winds, if they change too much, the Office of Foreign Asset Control is just kind of going to look at it and say, yeah, maybe not. And here's the thing. The new American president, he's not a politician, which means that diplomacy as we know it and the rhythm of government that most politicians will utilize, that's not on his radar. If he thinks something needs to be done, he's going to cut to the chase and do it, for better or worse. It's going to be decisive, good or bad. And given the fact that a lot of his supporters are either moderates, aka former Democrats, who have either felt abandoned or abandoned the Democratic Party, or conservatives, to some extent, the whole situation with Maduro in Venezuela, it's interesting to see how that'll turn out. The one thing is, Ukraine and Israel, they're bigger international incidents. Venezuela, kind of comes in third place when you compare to those two things. Unless Maduro decides he wants to, physically go after Essequibo. But there's now, to some extent, if the government was so confident before the US election, doesn't matter who wins, we're fine. Well, now it doesn't seem like we're fine. How is it that we're now still having to, it's one thing to try to get support from the current administration. It's another thing to try to get support from the Republicans because they've swept the whole thing. But we're also having to engage with Democrats as well. Is it that we didn't do anything before the election? Or is it that our pre-existing relationships are no longer sufficient? And yes, it does make sense to try to get support on both sides of the aisle because then it will make it easier to convince other people to support you and to push whatever you need through, one way or the other. And I do think that we have a reasonable case. But the flip side is I do think that if the American administration wants to, cancel Dragon and tell Venezuela, nah. It's kind of rough for me to argue against that because I know enough about what's going on in Venezuela to know that it's not good. So, we're still trying to secure the Dragon gas deal after we were told it's secure. So essentially, one of the few pieces of good news from the government over the last year and a half, 2 years, is still, as Karen Teixeira said in the past, up in the air. I wonder what else we need to consider up in the air. All right. We'll just hit one more story before we take the break. This whole situation, it's hard to know exactly what to make of it, but we'll just go with what is reported on the surface. Of course, Alan Warner, who is known to the general public as a friend to the Prime Minister, I'm not entirely sure if that has officially been declared or not, but one of the men, I believe, involved in the whole Inez Gate situation, giving the Prime Minister a heavily discounted, it was a gift. Is that gift ethical? That's a whole other kettle of fish. Now, involved in illegal quarrying, he decided to sue the state because going without his assets for a few months was unfair and unconstitutional. And the court basically said, listen, if it turns out to be unfair, you could seek redress from damages after the fact. But for the most part, this matter is going through and your equipment will not be returned because this is a serious matter. Now, the court said something very interesting. Because reputational damage over withholding your assets, that's not what's causing any reputational damage, if at all. They basically said it was the police raids that did that. And I don't think the court was trying to throw the police under the bus. Rather, and I will go a step further, it's not just the fact that the police basically is investigating you and confiscated equipment and raided your quarry on the basis of alleged illegal mining, but there's also the fact that it is public, it's on the public record, and if this is incorrect, correction should have been issued, statements should have been made by the various government officials that the licenses were granted after arrests were made. And I believe the court, the court, this current ruling is from the Court of Appeal. The lower court basically said, you can't retroactively apply these things. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that was already set in the court. That's not how it works. One of the questions in this whole situation will still remain, if the government wanted Alan Warner to do quarrying for it, why did they not give him the legal permission, the official documents to grant him that? It's just one of the things that's puzzling to me, because they could fast track it after he's arrested, arrests were made. I don't understand what's going on with this. How is the government so inefficient that the chain of events for this situation can happen the way it has happened? The flip side is this. Is it that they wanted it so? We have to ask that question, because one of the complaints is the fact that Mr. Warner, essentially, by not being officially recognized, is probably not paying whatever fees or taxes he has to be paying for his operations, and is therefore selling the state its own property, because he's quarrying on state lands, I believe, not paying the relevant dues, profiting off the state. Did somebody want it that way? We have to ask that question. It's an ongoing one. However, I won't be surprised if this whole case eventually kind of turns into nothing. I don't have confidence that the criminal justice system can see matters like this through. I could be wrong. That's why I said I don't have confidence. Not that it's impossible, it's just I don't feel good about this situation. Kudos to the officers that went through with this, but with that said, we'll wait and see. Let's take a break. When we come back, we have Mr. Shah. Stay tuned.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
This holiday season, bring the magic of Christmas home with WESN's Joy of Christmas. Relive timeless classics, from the laughter to the heartwarming moments that make the season unforgettable.
Hey, like the lamp, not the rat, like the lamp, not the rat!
Santa's coming to town! Santa! Oh my God!
Woo!
Oh, baby.
Experience Experience the joy of WESN special productions, crafted to bring you new stories and cherished memories. This year, let WESN bring the joy of Christmas to your home.
Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown!
Catch the spirit, catch the joy.
Anchors away. May the force be with you.
Only on WESN, your content capital.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
I'm back here on Talking Point on WESN, the content capital show. Michael Small here. Allow me to reintroduce myself and my co-host. He's the man that's in the Christmas spirit, at least more than me right now. He is none other than Mr. Keaton Shaw. Good morning, Keaton.
Good morning, Sean. How are you doing?
I am doing less festive than you, which is grammatically incorrect, but roll with it. You know what
I will put it this way, as I've indicated many times, it's my favorite time of the year. So I basically look forward to every aspect of it. And though you may be seeing decorations, the celebrations haven't started and maybe quite limited this year, but that's okay. Enjoy the very little momentous aspects of the festivities that you can enjoy. Make it a Merry Christmas for your own self in your very own way.
I mean, for multiple reasons, I don't know. For me, this Christmas seems to be not so festive. But listen, Christmas is the most stressful time of the year because I never know what to get people. I am horrible trying to figure out what to buy for gifts for people who I'm supposed to know very well. But there's a part of me that's like, well, most of the people in my family are not very demanding, and whatever they do need, they get for themselves. So there's nothing left to get them. So anyway, that's
sometimes you do. Sometimes all you need to do is give a listening ear or a shoulder to lean on. Believe me, that goes a longer way than a lot of other things.
No,
People have wants, but sometimes a listening ear.
I know it's the
shoulder
thought
to lean on
that
is good.
counts, but you know, trust me, there's enough listening throughout the year. So for Christmas, we need to have something, and I am not the person that likes to say, well, I'll just buy you a tie.
At least, Sean, you're honest. Put it that way.
Well, yeah, because to me that seems like a cop-out. Anyway, speaking about cop-outs, we're in 2024. We're coming to the end. We're almost at the end of November. So we have 30 days till Christmas and approximately 35 or so days for the rest of the year. Now heading into 2025, it seems as though, I guess you could say the election might be summed up for two things. We were going to say the economy and crime, but now, according to one business chamber, it's the Forex situation specifically and crime. And I find that interesting now that I'm wondering, and could this be somewhat of a hallmark that the energy sector really has reached, you know, the beginning of the end, I guess you could say. And maybe it doesn't have to be so if Dragon comes through, whatever. But with the beginning of the end of the energy sector and the boom that it was, our forex situation always relied on that. And now there's a lot of talk going on with regards to what are we supposed to do in this situation. Now they're looking at changing the exchange control laws because even buying forex off your relatives might be illegal, and I understand that. But Keaton, ironically, what did I just say? The two big issues might be not the economy in general, but the forex situation specifically and crime. I would just like to know, we could change the forex control laws all we want. How are we gonna enforce it? Do we have the manpower and the facility to keep track of every foreign currency that comes into our borders to know, hey, you sold it to your family, you know, that's illegal, and we'll come after you? Like, I think to some extent we have to realize there's certain things that it's just not practical to control, and if we push it too far, people will just further ignore the law.
I don't think it's accurate to suggest it's the beginning of the end first to the oil and gas industry. We have experienced significant decline, of course, in production, but it's not necessarily the beginning of the end. There is still exploratory works that are taking place, of course, and there are other gas fields that will come into operation. I think the Calypso gas field is the first to come in the beginning of 2027, the first quarter of 2027. So you might start experiencing some increased revenue being generated through that. So it's perhaps misleading to suggest it's the beginning of the end, but there is a decline as we've witnessed over the last 10 years in particular, and that will continue into 2027. We will see what transpires then. But the issue surrounding foreign exchange, of course, continues to be a hot topic debate. We've seen media partners in TNT have been doing investigative pieces, and in some instances have been doing extensive reporting on this issue in particular. And the latest actually comes from the Joint Select Committee that focused in particular on the Financial Intelligence Unit and its operations. And as you mentioned, based off of the law, and if I were to take a look at the Exchange Controls Act, according to the Exchange Controls Act, in particular chapter 79, section 6.1, transactions involving the buying, selling, borrowing, or lending of foreign currency should only be conducted through authorized dealers. And to be more specific, those are dealers that are authorized through the central bank. So the question being asked by Government Senator Lawrence Hislop is if he, as a traveling citizen coming to Trinidad from the United States or from Canada, for example, were to bring in foreign currency and then sell it or lend it to his family, if that is against the laws. And technically speaking, the law in itself might seem very plain, but it is argumentative, it is ambiguous. But from the very basic reading, yes, it suggests that it is illegal. But I think coming to your point where you indicated, how are you going to actually control this mechanism? I'll put it this way. I don't think you can. Currently, there are laws for most nations that allow you to travel or to come into the country with a certain amount of cash. You're allowed to, come in with a limited amount of cash. That in itself probably is not checked or not necessarily verified. So that in itself is the very first instance of where you're going to have difficulties in controlling it. Secondly, if you take a look at what's happening locally, you have various shops, you have various institutions that are advertising the purchase of foreign exchange. They're purchasing foreign exchange at various rates. You see it on their window, printed on paper. We buy foreign currency or the US dollar at $7.50 or $7.80 or whatever the case may be. That is what they are doing now. And if domestically that situation is happening and it's not being controlled, which does not fall under the remit of the FIU, but rather central bank in itself, then I cannot see how you're actually going to implement laws or ensure that they're enforced and controlling citizens who are traveling from abroad, selling or lending foreign exchange to their families. But the situation in Trinidad and Tobago dictates that you're going to see that happening more and more. It's existed for years. There's no secret about that. It's existed for years. But it's also going to be now, for some, quite possibly, their only source of gaining foreign exchange. So amending the legislation is one thing, but you don't necessarily have the resources or the ability to enforce such law. And that, by the way, in itself has been a problem with most laws or most legislations that have been passed within recent times.
I was trying to formulate some of my thoughts while you were speaking there, Keaton. The situation, I understand when people say that we've always had these challenges, but when you look at what the banks have done with the credit cards, and when you look at the fact that more and more people are complaining about accessing foreign exchange through the banks, right? As well as the fact that when you look at our major conglomerates in the country, what do you hear? Oh, well, they invested in a business in Florida. They invested in a business in parts of America, in parts of the Eastern Caribbean, etc., etc. You don't necessarily hear about big new investments in TNT. You hear about money outside being kept outside, because the question is, if you bring the money back, you probably won't be able to get it out. It'll have to be stuck in TT dollars. And there's one letter to the editor, and I'm not too sure if they were also referring to that, but they were referring to what happened to Venezuela's economy and what the foreign exchange shortfalls meant for them. And probably while they still have the oil and gas, their energy sector, for political reasons, various, started to become less and less capable of earning the hard currency that it used to at the height of Venezuela's economic standing. And now they have, of course, not everything they're going through, we're going through, but there are some parallels with the Venezuelan economy and our economy. Dutch disease is happening in both cases. And it's a potential warning sign where we shouldn't necessarily think it can't happen to us. Because every time I hear people say things along the lines of, well, we've had these challenges before, I am concerned that maybe it's underrepresenting the situation, because that might be true, but the credit card limit on US spending wasn't what it is now. And we've seen successive reductions by all banks over time as they have gotten more and more fear of not having enough foreign exchange to pay off essentially the credit card spending to the retailers that Trinidadians shop at, / pay off the bills of the small businesses who are using it to finance their foreign imports. And it comes back down, I think, to the question of how to solve this. Some of the people who I was speaking to last week, I think it might have been Dr. Sajoan herself that basically said, it's either Dr. Sajoan or Karen, I can't remember who, took the stance of, look, trying to deal with the demand side in the long run is not going to work. We can't shrink the demand enough to get things back on track, because we're dealing with a shortage of supply, and we have set up our economy to run on imports. And it's going to take a while before we could move away from that. It's not impossible, but to say that we're going to fix our issues by shrinking demand, we could shrink demand somewhat. I don't know if we could shrink demand enough, right? But it seems as though there's no quick fix to this, because dealing with trying to get more forex supply, unless we get like a magical windfall of natural gas coming through the pipes immediately, we are where we are. We're not going to start manufacturing cars to export to the world overnight or anything like that. We're not going to make enough cocoa. We're not going to get back to sugarcane. We're not going to produce enough peppers. So I don't know, like, where do you think, in very general, we should start? Because to me, I think, look, we just have to bite the bullet, deal with the shortages that exist, try to reduce demand, but really work on diversification so that the supply in the long run is not based off of gas deals that may or may not happen.
To the very first point, and you were speaking about Dutch disease, I don't think Dutch disease is happening anymore, particularly in instance of, TNT, and that's from the very basic definition of Dutch disease, which sees sectors within an economy decline while there's rapid development in one sector in particular that focuses majority of times on natural resources. And in this particular case, it would be our oil and gas industry. I think what you're seeing now is the result of Dutch disease that has impacted TNT. I don't think it's happening. I think we're now experiencing the results. But I come back to a point that I've made previously, and that is in respect to diversifying. We can repeat ourselves all we want. Diversification is going to take foreign exchange. It is going to, cost TNT a lot in respect to development because you need that investment in foreign exchange. So it's something that's going to be more and more difficult the longer and longer we wait. It's going to be difficult now, but it's going to be even more difficult next year. The thing is, something that you have to examine a bit further is whether or not there is, to the question about investments in Transmedia. There is investment. There may not necessarily be foreign direct investment, but there is investment. We have seen, at least just from my point of view, from just observing, if you drive across TNT, development in certain industries, for example, construction. I am seeing development in respect to retail shopping centers, and these shopping centers not only have been, operational with a number of stores opening up, but you also see the foot traffic. Now, whether or not that equates to spending, that's something else. But it shows that there is still investment, and it shows that even though purchasing power has declined, people are still buying. It's a similar thing with foreign exchange. The demand is there. The demand is getting heavier and heavier every day. The supply isn't there. And I even have question marks in respect to that statement because I've spoken to many of people, and even in conversations, you would hear people say they can get foreign exchange cash. And even some have suggested, and I use the word some because we've heard from one economist who has spoken publicly. I say some from a private conversations with individuals who have argued that the banks are the ones who are holding it. The banks in Trinidad and Tobago are a law unto themselves. I think that's something people need to realize, that the banks in TNT are a law unto themselves. They already have their own control mechanisms, and even though it is being said that they take directive from central bank, the way banks operate or have been operating, it seems to be very much like the sort of cliquish behavior. But it has been suggested by one economist and from others who I've spoken to that it's really the banks who have the cash exists. But withholding the actual cash has also sent demand up, which has fueled black market trade. And somebody asked last week, where is the cash coming from for the black market trade? And I'm wondering if it's, somehow or the other, it's exiting the vaults of these banks and making its way onto the streets. It's something that needs to be examined further, but it's not going to be examined further because, as I mentioned, the power that banks possess and the, how they operate, it's as though it's a law unto themselves.
Well, here's the thing though, demand for Forex is growing. Now, we're not entirely sure is it growing because small businesses could get less cash. Well, not could get less cash, but basically that's the business model a lot of local businesses use. I import something to sell. I import raw materials to make into something, or I import a finished product to just sell outright. You say shopping centers are opening up with new shops, new retail outlets, but we're not necessarily seeing the manufacturing or the processing side increasing, at least as far as I'm aware. I think one of the things that's holding agriculture back might be predial larceny, so it's at least for small businesses to have the chance to grow into bigger operations. That's one of the factors that's making it difficult for them. We're not seeing the big conglomerates invest into food production to the level that I think is possible, but c'est la vie. I'm wondering, Keaton, if the demand for Forex really just comes down to the fact that our current retail situation, I'm not entirely sure if it's in a healthy position, and people are looking at online transactions as a more, as a cheaper alternative to buying local retail. Because to some extent, some of the things you just don't buy locally, right? Because it's just the markups are going to be too high and it doesn't make any sense. and you will save money. And the facility through your credit card, at least before, used to be available. I'm not entirely sure now, depending on what it is you're looking to buy.
Well, then you've just spoken of a link between the use of credit card and international domestic purchase. Because of the limits to foreign exchange now on everyone's credit cards. And if you don't have limits for your credit card in terms of foreign exchange, and really, kudos to you, well done. And you're very, very fortunate in that aspect. But because of the limits associated to foreign exchange on credit cards, there's only so much that one will be willing to purchase now online through shopping. In some instances, people will be forced to shop domestically. So it's not one of those mechanisms from this limited to credit cards that will be impacting people and their shopping habits. You may be pushed or squeezed into a position where you have to shop locally. And the thing is, though you may get less for your dollar, it probably is the limit to that foreign exchange which is impacting it, in terms of choice. See, I think that's what you're going to see. I think that's what's also probably going to fuel more retail outlets opening up. And I question foreign exchange all the time. I question how foreign exchange is allocated, who it's allocated to. Question marks were raised from the owner of Ramsar Dairy Product. Question marks were raised from the owner, not the owner, sorry, but rather the president of the Automobile Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Questions have been raised from various outlets. But the thing is, you see foreign franchises opening up all the time. You see them expanding. And I point out once more, when one franchise opens up, you have to pay rent in foreign currency for that one franchise. You have to pay trademark rights for in foreign currency for that one franchise. And it doesn't matter if it's a food franchise, it doesn't matter if it's retail clothing, jewelry, whatever the case may be, you still have to pay foreign exchange and you have to pay it. You still have to pay royalties in whatever the form may be, but you have to pay it in foreign exchange. So it comes back to the point where if I have a limit on my credit card, there's only so much that I can purchase online now. And even though it may stretch a bit further, I may be forced into a situation if I find myself in a bind where I have to purchase it locally. It may be twice the price, but it may be easy in the long run. One of the other things I realized is happening, and I don't know if it's associated with all the banks, but if I take a look at RBC, for example, if you have a credit card with RBC and you use US on it, you can just pay it off in TT. In other words, when you go, if you use US, if you swipe your card, if you're shopping online, you go to the bank and you simply say, well, this is my credit card bill, I'm paying it off. But another bank like Republic Bank, if you use your US side of the credit card, when you go to the bank to pay your credit card, they ask you, how much US did you use? If you say, well, I used 400 US, they said, okay, so you're going to have to pay us back 400 US by the exchange rate. If you understand what I'm taking place there, it's just two separate things. I'll explain it further to you in detail sometime, but it's oftentimes confusing when I speak to people. They say, well, what's going on? I'm confused. Do I pay an exchange rate? Do I just pay to clear off the credit card? Do I pay in TT? Do I have to go pay in US? What do I do? And that is where banks also need to be a bit more clarified in their approach to the situation as well. I think this is where we need to start educating people as well on the use of credit cards, because even though it may seem simple enough, it may be confusing to others. And that level of communication as well from the part of banks needs to improve. That's where people might get confused. It's simple to you and I, if I've just explained it that way, but it's very confusing to others.
Now, one of the things, I guess, not just the government, but the private sector, we're using foreign exchange for recurring expenditure, to import. Yes, okay, to pay franchise fees. Some of those are one-off, some of those are not. But the key point is, private sector is utilizing the foreign exchange available to it, at least right now, to continue this recurring expenditure chain. We import things to sell. The government incurred foreign debt. The most recent large bond issue, I believe, was to try to pay off some of the deficit in last year's budget. And in doing so, they converted those foreign bonds or the money that they gained into TT currency to pay their recurring expenditure while utilizing the foreign currency, putting it, I assume, on the market. So you did kind of kill two birds with one stone. But the reason that I'm getting at is the fact that, notice I'm saying recurring expenditure, not investment. As you said, to diversify will require foreign exchange. Right now, the government's foreign debt position is more or less equal to our foreign exchange reserves, which also is touted by the Ministry of Finance as how many months of import cover we have. So we have one reserve that is kind of being the backstop for two things, and if, heaven forbid, both of those things apparently require our reserves, we don't have enough to try and treat with both issues if they both come home to roost at the same time. Meanwhile, I'm wondering, I'm afraid, and I don't know if you'll agree with me, that essentially the window to easily get foreign loans in order to finance diversification, to try to improve our export position, that might be over. Not to say that we can't get more foreign loans to get the foreign exchange to invest in diversification, just that to do it easily, to do it without feeling a lot more penny pinching, if at all, that window might be closed because we did it for recurring expenditure. I don't know if we could continue to incur foreign debt if we wanted to diversify. So that mechanism to do it, the window to do it without having to sacrifice something, I think is gone. And the private sector, to some extent, one could argue, it seems as though they're willing to continue operating until the wheels fall off. And then outside of those conglomerates with foreign assets, I don't know if anybody could diversify. But when the forex runs out, that's when you're gonna need to do it to continue to keep your business running. So I feel as though the private sector, at least a lot of people are not looking to the future.
Yeah, but what else do you expect the private sector to do? Just shut up shop and that's it? They're not going to do that. Private sector is not just going to shut up shop and say, all right, cool.
No, but to find other opportunities that utilizes foreign exchange in a more efficient way.
But that is what I don't. That is what I'm confused about what you're saying. Could you elaborate? What
Because
you mean?
Right now, we're using a lot of the forex, both in the public and private sector, for recurring expenditure instead of capital investment, right? So we have a food security issue, but we're not seeing anybody look towards, all right, how do I invest into food manufacturing and food processing and growing? What about clothing? We import clothes. For the life of me, we have UTT graduating designers left, right, and center. They could design clothes. Why? I mean, I'm not talking about producing brand name sneakers down here, right? But I am talking about having local manufacturing to suit our everyday needs.
No, in that respect, if you take a look at agriculture, the processing and packaging part is something that can be looked at in the immediate term. But it's going to take a lot of investment in the agricultural sector to start up. And I don't think businesses are willing to invest that amount of money. No, you're going to need land. You're going to need a lot of equipment. It's going to take foreign exchange to get that equipment. You're going to have to pay for labor, which is not necessarily going to be the bigger issue. But even then, with what is taking place with our climate and whatnot, it's still going to be something that's very difficult in respect to the investment. So you're not going to see the private sector necessarily taking that full-fledged initiative or going fully head-on because the returns from agriculture aren't going to be immediate. So this is the issue there in itself, which is why, even though you have incentives on the part of the government, that is just for small-scale farming. This is nothing to do with large-scale food production, which is necessary at this point. I hear your point in respect to clothing, and I agree with you. You have people graduating left, right, and center. But even the investment capital to start up is something that people don't necessarily have. And beyond that, what's going to happen? We're going to have to import a lot of this material again to even start with the manufacturing side of it. So yes, you have points, but it all comes back to foreign exchange.
Well, here's the thing. So, all right, importing the raw materials will be cheaper than the finished product, so that would help the demand side a little bit. But take the examples out. The point is, When the foreign exchange gets worse, right? And we no longer can import the level of food and goods that we're importing. Then what are we going to do? And that's my concern. I understand that businesses are looking at the situation and they don't necessarily want to commit it because they don't necessarily see how they can make profits. But the window in order to make the investments is closing, because when our foreign exchange supplies are reduced even further, it's going to be even harder to say, all right, now that we can't afford to import the things and we need to make it here, now we're going to divert what little foreign exchange we have left to try to diversify, to do more production here. That's the thing. I am looking at the long run and I'm saying making that shift when the reserves reduce further, or not the reserves, the supply reduces further, because we can't expect whatever gas production or oil production we have now to continue, right? It's going to be even harder now. Maybe we could get gas to keep the various petrochemical manufacturings online, but the revenues from the LNG trains, etc., all of that, it's going to be over sooner rather than later. And then we won't be able to afford diversification when we need it. Why are we waiting to the point where we're going to absolutely need it? Because that's when we are most likely least going to be able to afford it. That's the point I'm making. That's my concern. It's not easy. There's no easy way, but...
No, I agree with you. There's not necessarily going to be an easy way, but again, you try and tell that to the private sector where right now, not only do I fight for survival, but the investment that I have, I want to see immediate returns upon. That is the attitude right now. This is why I'm seeing the incentives that exist for agriculture, just for small scale farming. You're going to need larger initiatives on the part of the government. And Sean, just a little example with respect to agriculture. Agriculture has been the focus because of our food import bill. But a lot of this stuff that we import, or our food import bill, we are going to be producing veggies and fruits that still aren't necessarily going to necessarily cut down our food import bill. You're not going to see Trinidad and Tobago producing wheat-based products on a large scale. You're not going to see. Listen, one of our colleagues did an experiment where they tried to grow an apple tree in their backyard, and it worked. It worked, but they were getting small apples. It's not something that you're going to see happening on a large scale in Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, new technology exists where you can adopt initiatives or measures to try and do such in the tropical climate. But again, where is that investment going to come from? Where's that foreign exchange going to come from? I hear the points that you're making, and you are making points which has been argued previously, and it's points that still hold water. The problem is the investment that is necessary now is not going to come from the private sector, because whatever money that I still have, I want immediate returns upon it. Now, they're not just going to close up shop and move out immediately. It's happening with micro business enterprises because of extortion. For the large scale enterprises or the large scale operations or the legacy operations are not necessarily going to just close up shop and move out immediately. But they are not necessarily going to invest in something in which I don't know if a future exists for in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know if I'm going to get an investment, if my investment is going to yield significant returns. And I don't know in terms of the economic outlook whether or not it's worth it. But one of the points which you really hit, and I think it's very, very important, we are graduating students every single year. UTT became the hub for Trinidad and Tobago in respect to our industries that are not always focused upon, like creative industries such as animation, fashion, etc. We are churning out graduates, and even if people are still entering it and the hope that there will be great investment in the future, there needs to be great investment now. You spend so many years in university, you have a degree, but your degree is not necessarily worth anything when you exit, because simply there is not investment in that field, or jobs don't exist in that field. And the existing fields which people think always make money, such as law, such as medicine, etc., those have become so saturated, it's a fight to even get in. And if you get in, you have a 3-month contract. So those are things to bear in mind as well. It's a good point that you made in respect to university students, something that is not focused on. So every year, for the last 5 years at least, when you hear a budget presentation, and I remember what, 2, 3 years ago hearing, Madam Speaker, the economy is booming. I was here like, do these people live in a fantasy land? But I guess the Salary Reviews Commission allows them to live in a fantasy land.
The thing is, that it's interesting that you said that. One of the things that came to my mind, because, hey, we talk about tourism, right? We don't necessarily know what our local, what is our national dish. If people ask what is the food of our country when they come and visit here, we kind of have a random collection of things. A lot of it is not necessarily healthy of things, and they're kind of very similar. Like, what is the philosophy of our national cuisine? Do we have one? But more importantly, I thought, as you were talking about designers being graduated, I know I brought up the point originally, but when you reiterated it, it sparked the brain thinking, what is our national style of dress? We have traditional styles of dress that we have adopted from the ancestral cultures of our various lineages. But what does it mean to dress like a Trinbagonian, right? In the sense of then, because a lot of different regional countries, nations, whatever, areas in a country, they'll have certain fashion styles that will then fuel a fashion industry, which I think we could have had if we really wanted to, if we took it seriously, and we could have made it work commercially for our local market. But we're not. I don't see anybody having any long-term vision. And it goes back to something you said. I think you implied that perhaps there's not a lot of confidence in the future of the economy. And I don't think you were intending to be alarmist, but I'll go there. To me, what the private sector is doing is basically saying, listen, I don't necessarily have confidence that long-term planning is the best way to go. So I'll keep my focus short-term. The conglomerates are looking long-term abroad. I don't know if they're necessarily completely looking long-term locally. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, we have legacy businesses that are big. They seem too big to fail now with regards to our version of it on our scale. I wouldn't be surprised if those legacy businesses, depending on where the economy goes, starts to diminish their operations, shrink it, maybe even in some cases, fold it up altogether. They're not going to fold up the entire conglomeration, but depending on how things goes, if it seems as though, and I agree with you, it's not the private sector to solve all the problems. I just find it alarming that the private sector seemingly doesn't have the confidence to think about these things long term. The government has to, try to unbalance that equation on the positive side to some extent. But the way how it's going, if we're not looking at the long term, if the government isn't looking at the long term and the private sector isn't looking at the long term, right? Because we see government spending and it's hard to see any indicators of long-term thinking. Doesn't that mean that we're essentially on the road for long-term destruction because we're so short-sighted? And I don't think that our economy has reached the point where we'll be fine no matter what. I think that's being an ostrich, head in the sand, and we won't know how bad it could get until it actually gets there. And it can get there. And then, I don't know what we're going to do, because we are not the type of industrious people to pull ourselves out of a critical situation immediately now for now. At least that's the implications of how we operate on Trinity time. I don't know if you would agree with any of that.
Alan? I agree with most of what you're saying, but as you indicated previously, the level of confidence that exists, I do not think is there. Whilst our economy has not collapsed, our economy is sluggish. We don't necessarily live in a bad situation, but we're not living in the situation that we experienced when we had our oil and gas booms. And I think that is what people need to understand. So it's not me trying to be a pacifist and trying to play down the situation. No, we are in a very sluggish situation. Our economy it's slowed significantly. But I will not say that it has collapsed, and I will not say it's necessarily a bad economy. I'm not going to say it's a good economy, or it's just somewhere in between. I hope that that only time will bear witness to people opening their eyes to what you've mentioned this morning, to the effect that investment is needed now for long-term gains. You can't just think short-term. That's how people are thinking, and that's how they are going to think. And whilst I don't necessarily blame them, I also very much agree with the point that you made for long-term thinking. Now, in closing this particular chapter of Talking Points, I have a question for you, Sean.
Go ahead.
Very, very light-hearted question, considering all that we've spoken about this morning. What is the national dish of Trinidad and Tobago?
I think right now our best dish, our best performing dish internationally might just be bacon shark or
That's
doubles.
the thing. Is it bacon shark? Is it palau? Is it crab and callaloo?
I think
What is it?
I think the ones that are best known might actually be bacon shark and doubles, right?
Well,
You could get
remember
that
there's a
abroad, and when done well, they are very much appreciated. Callaloo and pilau, I don't think gets the traction because they're not maybe, well, callaloo is very unique. Pilau is not unique enough, but callaloo, I don't know if foreigners know what to make of it, right? Even regional Caribbean people don't necessarily always know what to make of callaloo, right?
the thing is, you remember there was to your point of doubles, there was an argument on the part of a former Minister of Agriculture who said that doubles is 100% imported. Why should it be considered uh, as a national dish?
Well,
But
everything.
I asked that question, by the way, because I also want people to try and call in and educate me exactly what is the national
Yeah.
dish, because there seems to be some confusion on that.
Yeah, my thing is this, because the Minister of Finance said it recently, we need to change our taste to local. And I'm like, time out, time out. We even import provisions. Not all provisions are grown locally, much less the flour needed to make all the rotis and the doubles and the bakes, you know?
Imported from our CARICOM neighbors. So there's some benefits to CARICOM in that sense as well.
But the point is, Keaton, what is local cuisine that is out? If you want to help the importing with local taste, you need to actually produce the food locally. Otherwise, you're just importing the ingredients. Like we don't import burgers that are already made. We import the bread and the patties. We import the meats that we consume. We import the vegetables. So with food, all we do for the most part is import raw materials and some pre-made microwavable stuff, etc., etc. So the fact that the minister is saying we need to change our taste to local, I understand the philosophy, but on a practical level, too much of that is imported anyway. How much of the oxtail is imported? It's not necessarily all produced locally, if at all, right? The pork that we eat, the lamb that we eat, how much is produced locally? I don't know, but I don't think it's all of it. So anyway, we do have to open up the phone lines. Do we have a caller now? We have San Fernando on the line before we've even opened the phone lines. I guess he wants to get his word in, or her. San Fernando, good morning, you're on there.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning.
Let me first say this to your last point first. We don't have any we have national dishes. And that is because we are a multicultural society. So I don't put emphasis on anyone. We have national dishes, and that is a good thing. Because of all those things that you all mentioned. Doubles, crab and callaloo, pilau, roti. We have national dishes. Kudos to Trinidad and Tobago for that. Now, let me say this. I listened to your discourse, and I want you all to think back later today, of all that you all talked about in terms of the diversification issues and the food issues, the food manufacturing issues. And, you know, I hear you all with your academic discussions without any solutions. And I keep saying it's about solutions. So in the vein, when I keep trying to spark Sean most of the time. So this, let me be the person that I am. I want Sean to be on the program. And let me say this about solutions. You know, we have in the agricultural sector, we have a massive poultry industry. Do you all know we import all the eggs, hatch those chickens that we eat in? You know we import that.
Yes,
they come
we
in
do.
on a Tuesday and a Friday. on Amerijet. And there has been no attempt for the industry to start producing our own hatching eggs. Rather than import them, we start a flock and start to hatch them. And I think that is an opportunity in that industry for the industry to start to develop that part of it instead of us using foreign exchange to import, because a lot of foreign exchange, to import those hatching eggs. We could look at that industry as a market to start to produce. So we further insulate ourselves from the foreign market. That is an avenue that is there. Now, in terms of the problem with you're talking about agriculture and all those things. The problem is teeth, and we have to change our teeth, and it comes over time. I know you all have an issue with this sometimes, but it comes over time. You know what I had? You know what I had for breakfast this morning? I had fried okra. And that is the kind of things that we have to start to develop, because we have good
stuff.
We have good local things. We have good local things. But it's about us putting it out there and starting the change. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you, caller. I don't disagree with you in that the local tastes have to change, but I think they have to change maybe even more extreme than some people might think, depending on what we can manage to grow. I think some of these staples we can make locally. We do make potatoes. Okay, they might not be as good as foreign potatoes, but depending on what you're using them for. But again, you point out a point that I've brought up before. I tend to speak more in generalities in the sense of we need to reduce the importation of the inputs as much as possible. And at the end of the day, it all comes back down to we need to see some investment for the long term, particularly in food production. I didn't necessarily have the details. Thank you for that. That's one of the things I was wondering for with the chicken production. Like, what is the situation with the growing? How dependent is it on imports? And
a prime example of trying to help in that particular area is that I know that the farmers group have been working on solutions, particularly artificial insemination for livestock farming, so that it helps in that regard as well. So that there's reproduction where you're getting livestock, and you having to try and rely less and less on importing. So they are working on to help with that supply as well, which goes to the very basis of what the caller from San Fernando is stating with hatchlings that we import. We import those eggs every week to supply our local chicken industry. But so I understand where the call is
not
coming
just the
from.
meat production, I think also for the egg production. The chickens to produce eggs, I think also, the origin, however far up the line you trace it, is also imported. And those are kind of things you would think, why does it have to be so? We're doing half the work already. So why can't we then go further up? And he might be right. It might just be that forget other meats per se, at least to start. Go with chickens because we know we have a demand for it.
Down to the feed that we give these chickens are important.
That's the other part. And what if we just do agriculture for the feed? That could be something to be done as well. To start, we have Digger Martin waiting on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, Kishan, and good morning, Mr. Paul. That gentleman who said... Right, he said he had okra and I suppose sada. I had fried karaili and sada. So
good boy. I haven't had breakfast and only breaking my heart this morning.
Right, so I am in sync with him. But more importantly, I want to tell you all, and you all have to remember this, the very first industry that this government closed down that was making foreign exchange was Caroni Green. Remember that pepper production Caroni was doing? The government closed it down immediately. They were making a foreign exchange, net foreign exchange, and people have to go back into that. And you know what the first investment this government did? Invested $5 million in a toilet paper factory. So that is the scenario. But what I want to talk about is monopoly. And it's by chance I listened to the last night town meeting, and it was fantastic. And there is an issue that they brought up. And when I contextualize it, I will link it to another one. Where the Fair Trade Commission allow the monopoly in the pharmaceutical. And we know it is a financier who they allow to take charge of all. So when you buy a panel, it's coming from one distributor. Let's put a pin there. During COVID, when everything was shut down, the government allowed a bottling plant to establish a bottling line right in Trinity. Another, I won't want to use the 1% phrase there. Look what WASA has done, and it has affected me personally. I have to spend $300 minimum every month to buy bottling water. Why? Because WASA continues to give me muddy water and continue to give me milky water. I have called them, I have made complaint, and they only respond in calling on a technician. Put it in my position with health issues. You're not going to touch that water until WASA come back to you and tell you the potable water they're doing is safe to drink. Let's throw that into the wife and the girl's white clothing. How can you wash the white clothing that becomes cream and dingy after you use WASA water? So a simple thing like that. So I am asking myself, is it the mismanagement of WASA is purposely done to help that bottling plant make a return in investment? And my household, I'm not going to call the number, spend at least $300 in bottling water. Recently, I couldn't get water for a month. You know why? The people who were delivering for me couldn't supply that because WASA plant was shut down, so they couldn't think. So I had to go all to the grocery around to get a couple of bottles, 2 bottles, because I asked them to deliver 10 cases every 2 or 3 weeks for me. So that is a simple thing. Nobody has done the metrics. And that is the metric from a household as citizens of Trinidad who is very affected by the government who has not done anything to help the challenged people. Go on. Have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. We have Marval on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller, good morning. Caller, are you there? I don't know if the call's connected.
Yeah.
Morning, caller.
Hi, good morning. I call from Marvel again. I'm from calling. Somebody could come go to walking. When we had County, they closed down County. What about all the rice land they give?
All right, I think we just got the gist of the point that you were making, Colo.
Yeah, sorry, caller, you were breaking up, but you mentioned rice fields, local rice production, I believe.
And I think that there's something like 9 rice farmers left in Trinidad. There were investments to open up a parboiled rice facility in Cuba. That never got off the mark. There was a ribbon cutting ceremony, and the latest update I have from when I inquired about it just a couple of months ago is that never got off the mark, even though there was a ribbon cutting ceremony. 9 rice farmers in Trinidad and Tobago that are struggling. And this is the thing with Carney 1975 Limited. And by the way, I've made this point before. Do you know that globally there is a shortfall in sugar production because sugar is now being used in the production of biofuel?
Yes.
We would have been exporting sugar to an extent that would see us probably being able to earn some of that foreign exchange just from the production of biofuel. Quite possibly. You don't know where this scale would have reached to this point, but we closed it down because of, I think, it was becoming less and less economically viable because Guyana, I think, their sugar production and their sugar exports were dominant,
Keith, and Dutch disease. I think a good chunk of it, not all of it, was Dutch disease. I think we have Marval back. Caller? Caller, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, I was talking about the county, all the county land that they closed down the county land. We had sugarcane here. We have no more sugarcane. We're planting rice, and we don't have any place to plant rice again. We had the nurseries for all these plants that gone, the pepper gone, everything gone. So how would we have plant food for Trinidad? We have nothing again in Trinidad. Everything gone to housing, and they didn't care about town. We don't even have a place to grind sugar to do nothing when we had all these things in Trinidad. Now we only have to buy rice, buy flour, buy sugar, buy everything from outside. And right now, food in Trinidad that we supply is more expensive than you're buying foreign goods. If you look at it, when you have to buy a piece of pumpkin, it's $5 and $6 when you get it for 50 cents. You know? When bacon right now is $18. If you're going to grocery right now, it's $18 for one bacon. You know?
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
caller.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
I mean, that's an important point because we don't grow wheat, but we could have grown rice and potatoes and provisions, and any one of those things could have been the source of locally manufactured flour, right? That if we had a mature industry, the prices might not have been so uncompetitive, because that's one of the things the callers pointed out, sometimes local food production. Part of it is because we do it at such small scale and our industries are immature. We have another caller?
We are promoting cassava flour now, and I think that's excellent, but I'm questioning even how much of that cassava flour is locally produced.
I mean, yes, exactly. We have St. James on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Hi, good morning, Sean and Keaton. I ain't calling a long time. I'm glad to see you all.
Good morning, caller.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see you all together. As I say, you all always make a great team, and you have an awesome production. The both of you all have something, boy. Anyway, I call this a simple thing. I call this a simple, quick thing, that might make much sense, but for me, it is a hurtful thing because I grew up eating my King Orange, my Portugals, all these things. Now, I had to go and buy Florida fresh juice and price, man. Could you all tell me where to get a good orange that I could suck a nice passing brown or something? Could you tell me where I could get some King Orange, some Portugals? No, this is what the government...
It's not a stupid question. It's not a stupid question.
They were to distribute lands to the people who were working Caroni to get these citrus things going 10 years ago. You understand? Everything is 10 years ago. Everything are simple things like I love my okra, I love my baigan, my bodi, my pumpkin, my bhaji. I just make me... These are the things I have to eat. Right? And the chicken thing, as you saying, sometimes I have to end up buying foreign chicken. It's cheaper than what some of the people producing. And they're saying about more hormones and more chemicals. But I doubt that very much because the U.S. is particular where Trinidad send products up to them, and when they do the test, they have to return the products because of the height of the fertilizer level and these things. So that is all I want to say, gentlemen, and God bless you all. Have a beautiful day and keep going. Keep going. I could see both of you reaching real far in the future in terms of helping this country. I mean, you're done doing it already, but you're going to go further. Have a blessed day. Bye.
We have to
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you.
I'll just say this. U.S. food production allows for more unhealthy practices than, say, Canada or Europe. Now, I don't know if they're worse than here, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they're good when it comes to concerns about things like
I don't think we're exporting.
They might be better than here, though.
The hormone levels don't really matter.
They might be better.
I don't think we're exporting.
We have Tunapuna on the line. Last caller. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Good morning. Good morning to the panel there.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to get you all since Monday, but I couldn't. The problem is, the line's so busy, eh? The problem is, I want to say, it's not a thing that the country, all the mangoes gone, Atlanta are taking it, steel and concrete, finish their complaining. When they're going up now in the hills and mountains, destroying it, and then the ball used to be imported so much, and I could tell you that I'm an old person now at 75. I used to go down to in town and so much rain and you never see a flood, and now it's 5 minutes from it, there's only flood and flood and flood all over the place. Because they're destroying, and if nobody says nothing and do nothing, when the tsunami, whenever the earthquake come and the tsunami come, we wouldn't have the mountain in the northern range and around us to help us. People destroying it too bad.
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't put a stop to that. And
all right, caller. I think,
nobody.
caller, you were breaking up, but we got the gist of your message, and thank you for that, because I think it's important for people to hear that from others. Keith and I was talking about the flooding. It was frustrating me again to no end yesterday. So thank you, caller, for bringing it back up, because I think she's right. Port of Spain, there was a time when it didn't flood like this, and now it floods like this. What went wrong? And it goes back to no long-term thinking, right? And no accountability.
Isn't this amazing that Vision 2030 leaves you short-sighted?
Basically.
You know?
Basically.
But to that caller from St. James, you could still get your citrus. Citrus is so small that you could pitch marble with it.
No, sometimes
I can't tell you the last time I saw.
We've
king
had local
oranges.
oranges, Keaton, that were of decent size in my recent memory. What I haven't had.
I'm waiting for citrus. The citrus has just started kicking in. I'm waiting to see more. I can't tell you the last time I saw king orange. You used to get some big orange. It used to look like boulders. And the thing is that he has a point. A long time ago, even to this caller from Tunapunna, what you're saying, long time, everyone had an avocado tree in their backyard, whether it be pollock, whatever the case may be, right? Now, if somebody has an avocado tree, they're your best friend, right? People don't have that anymore. It's the same thing with a lime tree.
Yeah.
A lime is how much?
Oh, Lord.
You know, $5 for 5 limes,
Oh, Lord.
right? If you buy it in the supermarket, you probably get it cheaper in the markets as well. But the practice now is I'm going to the market every single week and buying my produce for the entire week. That's how I'm planning it out. And even then, Sean, you'll be amazed at some of these prices. But he's right. You used to have mango trees. You used to have avocado trees. You used to have lime trees. People don't have that anymore. Listen, if it's your home, you have every right to beautify it. So we focus on orchids and all these beautiful flowers that we want. And that's good. That's all. That's your right. Enjoy it. But a lot of people don't. A long time ago, we used to have a green fig tree as well.
I mean, part of it, Keaton, part of it is pretty larceny. Why am I going to go through trouble of having a fruit tree or a fig tree?
Because people jump in my wall to try and steal my fruit. I agree with you. That is a huge part of the problem. But that's just to show you how there's a knock-on effect on everything.
Keaton, is it any wonder that in the same country we have seemingly poor planning and lack of long-term vision with regards to how we plan our urbanization, to the point where we have flooding, but we also have repurposed agricultural land that no longer is available, as I believe St. James was pointing out. So we're kind of seeing the lack of vision on both ends and how we're utilizing our ground, not just with the flooding, but also with the lack of farming.
Sean, I will give the example one more time. When you drive into Chagonas, you will see the Ministry of Agriculture. Beautiful, big building setup. Surrounded by agricultural land, no agriculture at all. And whilst I'm not against the retail sector booming and you're seeing that level of investment, the Ministry of Agriculture, do you see any agriculture? The most agriculture the Ministry of Agriculture has is the greenery that they've planted in the compound and the markets that they have on a Sunday morning, right, in the compound of the ministry. But there's no agriculture around it, and all that is agricultural land. And to me, I will keep stressing on it. So the caller from San Fernando asked for solutions. He gave an example of the importation of these eggs. I gave the example of the artificial insemination for livestock. We see the Ministry of Agriculture take some charge in this initiative. But then and again, as you pointed out, Sean, their budgetary allocation was free recurrent expenditure, no capital investment. So what's going to happen there? You know,
Guyana's rice industry,
private sector, right?
Guyana's rice industry is reportedly growing. So not just are they getting energy booms, but food production is increasing there. Now again,
Guyana was forced into a situation and they were exporting food. They were land laden with gold. They were agriculture and they were minerals. And they had that. And honestly speaking, that's how Guyana was set up. They're very blessed and fortunate with oil and gas now. And I hope that Guyana takes that investments to further invest within their economy, to diversify even further within their economy, and learn from the lessons that we have made in Trinidad. They should.
I'll say this. First of all, why can't we continue with rice production? And if we can't, okay, let's become the food processors. We buy their rice, we process it, everybody wins. Like, if we were a better neighbor, I think these things were potentially more readily available. And again, okay, if cassava flour doesn't work, then maybe rice flour. If rice flour doesn't work, then maybe potato flour. Why do we have to use wheat flour?
Listen, I can't blame Ghana if they have the capital now. Why am I going to send it to Trinidad to be packaged and exported? Why not just set up a packaging and manufacturing plant in Ghana?
I'm not going with packaging. I'm saying, instead of getting wheat flour, why don't we look to making flour from what could be locally produced here? As far as I'm aware, rice flour and potato flour could make bread.
Cassava flour is being heavily marketed. There's a lot of cassava currently within our markets. And the thing is, I'm asking how much of that cassava that is being marketed is locally produced. It could be 100%. I don't know. But I hope to get an answer soon.
So go back to what you said with regards to the importation of provisions. It might still be better to do it locally. And then depending, if we could export some of it, depending on how successful we are implementing these things, we could get foreign exchange to earn the money to buy the raw materials, as opposed to, well, we just import flour to consume locally. We're not earning the money back to pay for the next round of flour that we have to buy. Wheat flour, I mean.
Listen.
By the way, I miss Five Finger.
Conversations. It's going to be very, very frustrating. Okay, we live on an island. Water is another topic because we have to end, right? We live on an island where we are being told that we're going to get a 24, close to 80% or 90% of the country will have a 24/7 supply of water by the next election. We have so much rain and so much flooding, and yet the reservoirs remain low because the rain falling in the wrong places. So, listen, it's another subject, but it just goes to show you. It comes back to my point. Vision 2030 leaves you short-sighted. We will have a 24/7 supply, the majority of the nation by the next election. The rain falling heavily where you could actually swim to your next destination. It's falling in the wrong places where we don't have reservoirs located or that, reservoir levels still low. So I'll make it make sense. I rest my case in respect to this conversation. I have nothing further to contribute. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Just to add on a few things. One, I think chicken production could be improved, right? In various ways, not just the input side, but the actual production side. And then point number two, I think changing tastes, I think local pork and beef production should be a thing, but at least with regards to beef production, it might require taste to change, because I think we're underutilizing what we do produce out of the cows locally. We're not really making full use of everything. I don't know how much of it is turned into ground beef, and we're missing out because we're importing certain cuts as opposed to trying to make it work locally. Yes, it might be leaner, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Goes back to what people say, taste needs a change. Foreign steaks, apparently they have higher VAT on it or higher taxes on it. And I actually don't mind, despite the fact that it prices more steaks out of my willingness, what I'm willing to spend.
Well, at least you could have steak. That's good.
No, I don't. That's the point. That's the point, Keaton. I don't. I have not a ribeye, and I can't remember. Now, with that said...
You talk more ribeye. I'm looking forward to a good stew beef. Anyway. Today is a good day to have a good day, Sean Michael Small.
Folks, remember your allegiance to the Republic and stay safe. And always remember, Keaton, you might be too young for this, but it's nice to be nice. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Damn old.
WESN.